Confidence, self-esteem, and grace. They're like the holy trinity of getting your shit together, whether you're faking it till you make it or owning who you are unapologetically. This episode is here to remind you that it's a process and not a destination.
And honestly, let's stop giving so many fucks about what other people think. Their opinions, that is none of my business. Your life is yours to live. Today, we're talking about how to build confidence from the ground up, whether that's by putting in the work, trusting the process, or just showing yourself a little grace when things get a little messy.
And we're getting real about identity shifts, the patience it takes to grow, and why waiting for motivation is a total scam. So if you, like I, have been feeling stuck, uninspired, or just plain tired of waiting for the perfect time, this episode is for you.
So stick around, because later we'll be talking about small actions like trusting the process and ditching perfection, and how we can create massive shifts.
This is Give It To Me Bi, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything from a bi plus perspective. Now, let us give it to you bi.
Give It To Me Bi acknowledges that we live and work on Gadigal land. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past and present. Sovereignty was never ceded.
Hey, Steve.
Hi, Chad.
How are you, my love?
Yeah, good.
That's good.
Yeah, really good. January, God, we're coming up to the end of it.
We are. It was my birthday this week, which I think I hid from you somehow. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, I wasn't too... I mean, as someone who, I literally did nothing on my birthday. You kept mum about it, but I did. It.
Well, the thing is, I had big plans for it. I a few years ago did this thing called Chad House Clubhouse, where I was sick of not doing anything for my birthday. I don't want to grow old and say, they don't matter. I think it's a nice opportunity to celebrate you. And when do we ever get the opportunity to do that? And so I did this day where I planned 3 distinct different kind of hangs or clubs. So we did vinyl club. So I collect vintage vinyl records of show tunes and musical theatre. So
that is the most Chad thing I've heard in my entire life, and I adore you for it.
Yeah, and so we went on a vinyl hop through Newtown. That was great. Yep. Then the second club was art club because I like art, and then so we came to my house, did lunch, and then everyone painted, and then we did queer cinema club. So we had dinner, and then we watched Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and it was great. And I wanted to do it again this year. Had big plans, and it just delayed. And so I didn't tell anyone it was my birthday. I didn't plan anything, and I had an injury, so I kind of spent the whole day in bed and feeling sorry for myself. So that was my birthday.
Well, I mean, isn't that the perfect sort of getting old? Spent my birthday injured in bed.
Yeah. I always think when I'm older, will I remember the year that my body kind of started to break down? And I've thought that every year because it really started this year. This year. But this one actually started in bed feeling sorry for myself. So maybe I will remember this one.
Well, so I always tell myself that a birthday lasts 2 weeks because I'll usually never do anything on my actual birthday. Mm-hmm. But I'll throw something on a weekend either side and just have very low expectations, right? Like my 30th birthday, it was boat party, extravaganza, everyone in pink, wild,
great.
Everyone has to do a speech about me, but that's your 30th.
Everyone has to do a speech? I love that.
Yeah.
I'm so about that.
It is nice to have a special day about you. I'm not the one that went around telling people they had to make a speech about me. My friends are the ones that organized it.
Cute.
Yeah, I mean, birthdays, it's such an interesting topic, but I'm glad that you have given yourself grace.
Thank you.
Over the birthday that stuttered, I guess.
Yeah. But all is not for naught. This week was wonderful because I got to see you this week. I treasure the weeks that we actually get to hang out in person. We got together and went down.
Can I interrupt you?
Please, interrupt away.
It's so funny. We met up for a coffee before a meeting we went into that Chad is about to tell you about, everyone. And we're just sitting and chatting, and Chad's like, I haven't seen you in ages in person. I'm like, oh my God! And it's like flip a chair and get up and try not to break your back with a big hug.
I think standing next to you in real life, I realized just how pale I am. Like I've been saying on the last few episodes, oh, you look really tan. But I think the lighting really doesn't do justice how tan you've been looking. You go out for a run every morning for ages. You're in the sun. I am in my office all day, every day. I do not leave the house. I drop my kid to daycare. That is it for me.
It's so funny. The same people have been telling me since October, wow, Steve, you're really brown. I'm like, I get brown in summer. Like I tan. I'm half Croatian, part Maori. Like, and I'm in the sun for 4 hours. Like, it's gonna happen.
Like I could, but I would just not know because I've never touched sunlight. Like,
well, that's why I'm going to look twice your age in about 5 years' time. So.
Yes, that's why.
So tell us about the meeting. Tell us about the meeting.
Yes. So we'll probably touch on a few things related to this throughout the episode. But Steve and I went this week down to the city, which I never do. I never go to the city, but thankfully Sydney has a new metro system and it's amazing.
For our American listeners, that's downtown.
Downtown, yeah, the CBD. And we went to have a meeting with the New South Wales Minister for Mental Health. In December, I was a little bit fired up and I sent a bunch of emails off to members of parliament and representatives to say, hey, this is the bisexual mental health crisis at the moment. What are we doing about it? Bisexual people, as we've discussed before, were identified as a priority population in the New South Wales health plan, health strategy. And I wanted to see what's happening about it. What are we doing about it? What's the progress being made? And open the door for collaboration and opportunity to connect with community. As obviously through this podcast, we are connecting with community, and we are seeing in studies and advisory boards that those advisory boards and panels aren't made up of representative data of just how much bisexual people there are in the world. After that, I sent the emails. I got really awesome responses. They all got in contact.
Which is wild. I'm so proud of you, Chad. And I'm just so proud of you. I've worked with ministers and stuff before and like worked in advocacy for years, right? And when you said you flew off an email to the ministers, I was just like, it's a dark.
Yeah,
I literally said, I'm like, this is it. No, not whatever. But like, I hope this goes somewhere because it never ever does.
Yeah.
And you just get you get lip service. You don't really get anything. You don't very rarely get meetings. And I'm like, oh, it's a dark art. Like, you have to. There's just so many things, and you've been touched by an angel because tell them out what their response was.
Yeah, so we got one when I sent that email. I am very aware that I have come from a background of trying to be loud to be heard, and recognizing as I mature that being loud is great and it's a tactic, but usually it's not how you get somebody on side. And really, we are about being pragmatic and wanting to make progress. And so I looked at the strategy that they had put together and recognized that in that strategy, they reference all the studies that we reference, talking about.
Which is great.
It was
so reassuring when you see that, right?
Yeah. And it meant that like they had almost started the conversation by publishing it and saying, here's the trusted data that we're trusting. It's like, cool. Well, based on that, that it's a big deal. But really, politicians, people in power want to either do a good job or look like they're doing a good job, or just collect power. That's probably the third one that we'll talk about later. And so in writing to them, I was like, cool.
And that's not an assessment on the ministers we've contacted either. That's just like a general, that's just politics.
That's politics, just any power structure. And so in writing to them, it wasn't what are you doing? I haven't seen anything. You suck. It's a, hey, I would love to know, perhaps I'm not aware of, or can we help? Like, what can we do to help make you look good? And in doing that, how do we actually take those resources and give them to our community? And so I got really good responses from people, meetings scheduled, emails, follow-ups, all that kind of stuff. It's been really wonderful to connect with them. And we had the opportunity to go chat to the minister's office. talk about our priorities for the bisexual community here in Sydney or in New South Wales, and highlight that there is a mental health crisis in the bi plus population, and it just reaffirmed that this is a really good way to go about local action, and it's not hard. It is just needs to be intentional, because in that meeting they said this is the first time anyone's ever said this to us. It's like, oh, okay, so you've got it in your plan because it's come up and it's in data and all that kind of stuff, but no one's come through the office and said this is important to us. And they said, look, we get lots of people coming in here talking about trans stuff or gay stuff, whatever. It's like, of course, absolutely, we love that, but no one's coming in here talking about bi health or mental health. You're the first. It's like, oh, that's a problem. And so it is just about like the squeaky wheel, and visibility really matters. And visibility isn't just a social media campaign. It's like, who has power, who has decision-making potential, and how do they find out and become sympathetic to your cause? And that's where we are with that. So we're in conversation with ministers, and they're connecting us with other officers. And it was really affirming to see just how actually really simple it's been. Like, I spent like an hour emailing 3 people. I spent a good amount of time like trying to really finesse the email, and then we went down. We had a 45-minute chat. Like, time spent
so grateful
isn't that
for their
long.
time.
You know, super grateful. Yeah. They were really interested in helping and participating in community. But then it's just about getting specific of what do we actually want from them, and what's the ask, and what are we after. But it, like, time spent all in is kind of nothing when you think about it. And what if we all did that? What if we all wrote to our elected members or non-elected members, like people who like in opposition across the board in all countries? What if we just engaged? And it was really great. And it gave me a big kind of confidence boost for us that we can make an impact and we can have power.
Well, like we're not going to move straight into the topic, but like that takes a lot of confidence to take that step. But also, a lot of people would be thinking right now, like, oh, I wish I had the guts to do what Chad did. Did you have any doubts when you were writing those emails? Did you have any? Because I definitely do. I'd be like, I really need to reach out to this person. Oh.
Yeah. I think, absolutely. You always have doubts. Like, I think, one, it was 2 a.m. and I was fired up. I was very, we're talking about politics. All the shifting winds in politics at the moment kind of got me a bit fired up. And I had been reading that book I mentioned last year called No Shortcuts, all about collective action. And just like, individuals have tremendous power, but they have to recognize they have tremendous power. People get engaged to the degree that they're educated. However, they are educated to the degree that they engage. It's like a cyclical thing. And so it's like, cool, I'm not currently engaged with my local member, so I'm not educated on it. So how do I get educated? I need to engage. I need to figure out what power they hold, what their priorities are. Like, do they care about this at all? Which is fine if they don't, but like, you need to know a baseline of like, oh, they do care actually. However, it's not been made important enough to be a priority. How can I influence that? Mm-hmm. And we've kind of witnessed that, like, there are people kind of talking on our behalf that don't care about bi plus needs or trans needs or whatever it might be, that speak for us. And say, oh, why do other people feel so confident to do that and not me? Like, what if I just kind of, I don't know, stepped into that fake it till you make it kind of idea. Yeah.
The main thing that I've learned over the years is also about learning the process. There are unwritten rules and written rules, and every political office, every ministry, every individual, every organization works differently. And they will really, when dealing with different organizations, they really like to deal with things internally because they know the way that processes work. And so when you're an outsider, that's where my biggest doubt comes in, because I know that I'm an outsider, and also, working within organizations, I know what it's like to have outsiders come in and to, start making demands. And it's just like, we are on the same side.
Yeah.
100%. But, there are tried and true and well-tested ways of getting the things that we want. And so there's a huge learning curve But once you learn that, and you can learn it quite quickly, and it's as simple as when you've got a meeting, you go, all right, how do you work? Like, what do you need from us? Like, and you come in, you can take any sort of approach. And so we walked away with really, really clear goals. We know exactly what we need to do to sort of reach our goals in working with this ministry. And it's just so exciting. And we're also really lucky. We've got governments here in Australia that want to connect with community.
Yeah.
And, at least at this point in time, understand their own limitations and understand the expertise within community.
Policies change, processes change, and people change seats. And so there might be organizations that don't like outside input, but you'll also find the government riddled with external contractors and external advisors, all that kind of stuff. They need that because it backs their decisions sometimes. Like you can't move forward in a decision without saying, oh no, I asked the best or I asked the experts. So that's where you kind of go, okay, how do I become that person then? How do I become the connected or informed person that can then influence those decisions? And especially like that book I was reading, No Shortcuts, is so about the power of your network as well. And so understanding like, where is power? How is power made and distributed? Who is connected to that person? But then like, who is like the next cohort of people moving into power? So like, we might meet with the minister or the chief of staff or the deputy chief of staff or their person in the office doing admin. The person's probably doing admin in that office because they're interested in that and because they would like a position in that in the future. So, okay, connect with them, be kind to them, be empathetic to them. Like,
we've all been that person.
Absolutely. And I've just seen so many times like, oh, that's someone I knew in school or knew someone over there. And they just did this thing. And now they've got these titles. It's like, oh, you actually hold a lot of influence. Like, don't burn bridges. Don't treat anyone with an attitude outside of your values because it can really make a big difference.
Can I tell you something really cool that I've learned over the years as well? Like, even the people who reach like upper echelons, who have the fancy titles, and like some people say that I've got fancy titles, but I still feel like a little kid lost in the woods. They've all come from somewhere, and they've usually come from the same position we're all in. Optimistic, change driven, community minded, well intended. And like, when you like, I've sat down with some really impressive, powerful people, and when they tell you what they were doing, a couple of decades ago, you're like, oh, you were hardcore. Like you were just as rambunctious and everything, and that fire is still in there. Your titles and power and positions are often shackles. They quite often, people in those positions quite often really revel in being able to shake up those shackles a little bit. When we walk in, we say, hey, like, let's do something fun together. Like, let's actually do something really effective.
That's a really good point.
And if you can make it easy for them as well, and like engage them, like, I've just always been so pleasantly surprised.
I love that.
It's really cool. Yeah,
people are really keen to make change, but the processes of government are at times antithetical to change, and it's about approvals and about processes, all that kind of stuff,
which are necessary.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. But what we learned from our World AIDS Day episode when we talked about PrEP Access Now is that like there's the way it's done, and then there are other avenues. Like, so as a quick reminder, Australia was doing some really early trials on PrEP, bringing them into Australia. There was no one on the trial. It was taking too long.
100 people.
There was like, the rest of the world had PrEP. What the fuck are we doing? And Steve and his co-founders at PrEP Access Now just brought it into the country and just started. And it's like, oh, okay, the government just had to catch up because it was getting away from them. And so like, oh, change can happen through these connections, but it can also happen through bucking some of those things as well.
And in that process, we learned, they're like, we can't be seen to be doing this because we are limited by contracts, by government, by all of this sort of stuff. But what do you need? Do you need some office space? Do you need do you need some support? Because we can give it to you.
Yeah.
Because they want the exact same outcome.
I think one of the reasons why, obviously, we're talking about power and politics and how to kind of gain or claw back power is there are a lot of people feeling a bit powerless with the shift in political wins. Obviously, the inauguration of Donald Trump was this week. There's a lot to talk about on that topic. When obviously not a political podcast, but people were definitely feeling powerless and perhaps without hope. And this is how we see hope, right? Hope is active, and you build and create and design hope in your world. And we'll have a whole section at the end of the podcast about like taking local action and stepping into that as well, because I think before we get into all those things about gender and DEI programs that Trump is stripping from America and hopefully not influencing Australia to do the same, is like what Steve was saying before. How did you get the confidence to do the thing? How did you step out into these areas? And we've got a whole bunch of different things we'd love to talk about that can build that confidence, build the, like, kind of give yourself grace and step out into a version of yourself. We talked last week about making goals, and this is kind of like the stepping into the taking action on those goals.
Yeah, this upcoming period for many of us will require really active action personally to not be defeated, and really powerful. And that's why we're talking about this, like
Absolutely.
you said, is to be confident in yourself, to build your self-esteem, to build the skills around within yourself and around yourself to be able to pursue those goals. Because what we need to do is to be powerful and to create change over this period. Welcome back, everyone. So I've just been told off by Chad for saying welcome back because we don't normally do it. But stuff it. I'm feeling confident today, everyone, because we are talking because we are talking about confidence, self-esteem, affirmations, and giving yourself some grace.
Yeah.
So as we've talked about at the top of the episode, we've actually gone through some of our own examples of things where it takes some guts to take some action. And I think it's really important here as well to note, Chad, what we're discussing, apply it to anything in your life.
Yeah.
Like, we are talking about bi-advocacy because I'm not sure if you heard, Chad, but this is a very bisexual podcast. Don't tell anyone.
Very bi.
But the secret agenda here is bisexuality. But this applies, we were talking so much last week about our New Year's resolutions, and a lot of that, and we also talked about fitness because we're both going through some fitness journeys. But then so much of this applies to advocacy, your personal well-being, your relationships, your work, and your self-actualization. How you feel about yourself, how you move through the world. It's all really, really important.
Yeah.
And look, I'm going to kick it off by talking about probably my favorite saying is fake it till you make it.
I'm here for fake it till you make it. I'm so here for that. Yeah.
It's so simple, but it really is bloody true. And you're gonna talk about it in a sort of a similar topic in a much more clever way. But I'm gonna
now give yourself some grace, Steve.
I do. I am very self-aware. I am fully aware of my limitations. But you know what? I say fake it till you make it and do the work.
I think because so many of us assume that we need to have done the thing to be allowed permission to do the thing. And it's almost like, remember when you leave school and you go apply for a job and they say you need a resume. It's like, oh, well, I haven't worked, so I don't have a resume. So I need to work to put it on the resume. So it's just kind of like, how do you get started? And confidence is a bit of that. You kind of have to step out into it and go, I am just good at this. And kind of almost that like almost
delusion?
That delusion. Like
we are here for delusion.
Yeah.
Because you know what? There's there has to be something scientific about this,
Mm.
and I would love
There
you,
is.
Chad,
Yeah,
to
there
read the
is.
books
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Of if you are in the mindset of faking it till you make it, you are actually in that group of people who should be doing it.
There are tons of studies that have gone into it. It's almost a form of manifesting or a visualization. If you can see it, then you can be it. So if you can look ahead and say, I will be good or I am good, then you feel it in your body. It's almost the reverse of what we talked about with trauma last week. Like trauma is experiencing something that happened in the past, and visualization is experiencing something that's going to happen in the future. Your body, again, plays tricks on itself where you will feel confident because you are imagining yourself to be confident at some point in the future, and your body kind of confuses the two, and it happens accidentally.
Yeah. And like when learning a new skill or just doing, if you want to do something, whether it's creating change, learning a new skill, it's in the doing it that you learn. Yeah. And everyone has to learn. And also, like with fake it till you make it, sometimes you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this because I'm not an expert yet. But also, no one's ever really an expert. People with PhDs are studying their entire lives, and at the end of their career will still say they're not an expert because we're constantly learning. We're constantly learning.
I had a friend say to me like a few years ago, and it sounds really dismissive, but I think it was I kind of picked up the power reading between the lines of like, a lot of this is about fear, like what will happen if, and I'm scared of, and I don't want to be judged, and what if I screw up? And a friend of mine said, how boring. I was like, it's like how like that's not your fear. That's just a general inherited human fear that we all have. Let's talk about something else. Let's move on. Like, how boring is it that we are getting caught up on things that everyone experiences and not going, okay, I acknowledge that. What can I do despite that, or in the face of that, and step into that? And it can sound really dismissive. Like, I hear it, like when someone says how boring, but I liked how flippant it was of like, let's talk about interesting things. What are your values? What are your goals? Like, oh, that's quite cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I also preface or postface. Postface.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it as well. Like I said at the top, with do the work as well, because you do have to continue learning. You do have to have your mind and your heart in that position of, yes, I'm going to fake it till I make it, but the goal is to be, to achieve, to do the thing.
There are plenty of people in the world who are faking it and getting away with it. But the idea is using this to take a step, to trust yourself, to believe in yourself, not to hold positions of power and not have any smarts about you or anything like that. Yeah.
Because there have been plenty of times where there are things that I would have really liked to have done in, say, my career, where I've given it a hot go. And I've realized, this actually isn't for me. Yeah. And I don't ever want to be stale. I don't ever want to outstay my welcome. I don't ever want to put people in positions where I'm doing something, if I'm responsible for people or responsible for outcomes, where if I'm actually giving a negative presence. And you have to have that mindset of contribution and not taking away. I know that like one example of that is, in the HIV sector, we have peer workers, right? So people live with HIV supporting other people living with HIV. And I just love peer workers so much. We call it peer magic. Just the work that they do and the lives that they change is so incredible. And I've given peer work a hot go. And I've just really realized I'm really, really awful at it. I'm great at peer work. I'm great at peer work on a one-to-one basis. And but I'm actually much better at like, policy and speaking and writing and contributing in other ways. And so that's the thing, like I go into a space and I say, like, how can I contribute? And I give things a hot go. I give everything a hot go, and I realize where my skills lay. and I'm not going to keep on faking like I'd be a good peer worker, because it'd literally be sitting down with someone who's going through a traumatizing experience, and then I'm going to throw statistics at them. Like, no, they don't want to hear that. Like, I want to be like, oh, well, I understand how you feel, because 45% of other people who have been diagnosed within 5 months do feel that way. Like, that's not what they want to hear. And
thanks, bud.
That's how I speak, and I'm like, all right, that's not for me.
I feel so affirmed.
Totally. And
well, it's good to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses, and sometimes your weaknesses are just because you haven't spent the time to turn them into strengths. Like for me, right, with my fitness, or something that manifests in my life is that I'm not a great cook. I can follow a recipe fine, but I don't have the confidence about cooking. But that's just because I haven't spent the time to. So I can turn that into a strength, and that is a goal of mine for this year. But it's giving yourself grace of like, okay, that is a strength, that isn't a strength. I'm going to be kind to myself, recognize that like I didn't fail at this because I suck. Like I perhaps didn't have the tools or the capacity, and that's why I kind of fell short. I guess that's like something I'd love to talk about is a bit of grace. And so grace is that giving yourself kindness and understanding to yourself, especially when you make mistakes. It's like this self-compassion of like, we are so good at giving other people love and so hesitant to offer it to ourselves. And it's transformative. And grace, my partner and I had a conversation last night about the ways that I can be self-critical and kind of want to punish myself for my failings. And you really, like, grace cuts through all of that. Like remembering that like, oh, I'm human. If someone else did that, I would hype them up. I would say, "You've got this. Like, I love you. Like, you're wonderful. Why can't I do it for myself?
Do that for ourselves?
Isn't it weird?"
Yeah, and it's like a battery. It's like a battery boost as well. It gives you that little recharge, that little boost, because you can't. It's so normal, and like it is so normal and natural to be hard on ourselves. And it feels unnatural to be gracious for ourselves. But, that it's a real battery recharge, a real boost to be able to give yourself grace. It's so, so important.
Yeah. I'm on a bit of a reading kick at the moment because I'm back
at the moment.
Yeah. Well, for the last many years. But last year I didn't read too much. And this year I've made up for it. I've already read 5 or 6 books, and it's January 23rd. So I'm pumped because I get to do audiobooks in the gym, and I'm going to the gym. So it's great. But there was this great line in one of the books, and I had to rewind it to listen to it because it was just so like, I have fallen in this trap of like, look at all these mistakes I've made in my life. Look at all these different places I've fallen short or failed or not lived up to my expectations of myself. And this line kind of reset all of that thinking is no one is the sum of their mistakes. Like no one says, oh, that's Chad. Here's all the ways he sucks. You know, like it's not, it can't be true because we are so individual and we are made up of 1,000 million things. And it was just like, oh, I felt a bit of a release in the gym in that moment, mainly because I turned the treadmill from 12 to 4 at the same time. So I was out of breath, but
that's sort of a nice analogy of giving you grace. Turn the treadmill from 12 to 4 people.
Oh, I mean, fitness is always the ultimate analogy for so many things, sports and stuff. Yeah. I have looked at myself very critically previously and said, man, you just kind of suck. like look at all these ways that you failed. And there's this great, one of my favorite things about social media and TikTok is someone will have a piece of content that goes viral and then everyone kind of copies it because like, oh, wow, it's doing numbers. But my favorite trend lately is I'll see a post, someone saying, my therapist told me this and it was transformative. I want to tell you. And then I'll see 10 other people say the exact same thing that week in content. My therapist told me this. It's like, oh, okay. Everyone's just ripping each other off. Anyway, one of them went kind of viral recently and I loved it. People, if you say that you are self-aware, but you are only aware of your faults and failings and not of your successes and greatness, you're not self-aware. You're just being mean to yourself. And it's like, oh, wow, right here. Got me right here. It's like, I
Wow.
have often said, I'm quite self-aware. Here's all the ways that I fall short. Not, I'm quite self-aware. I celebrate my accomplishments and I celebrate the ways that I do turn up well in the world. And that it's a bit of a challenge. And it's a challenge that I'm kind of setting myself, is to be more present in the celebration and the appreciation of my my well-doings.
Yeah. I want to bring in another word that we introduced just before, with being self-aware, is also the delusion. It's so funny that we equate, like, you know what, let's get the definition of delusion up.
When I hear delusion, I think drag queens.
Totally.
So
correct.
If you don't watch Drag Race, there is this kind of concept of delusion. It's almost like a trait that people can have, is like, I'm so great, I'm wonderful, and people are like, man, she's delusional. But people have kind of taken that in later seasons and going, I'm here, I am that delusional bitch. Like,
exactly.
I have got it. And it's like, oh, you've turned that really into a positive thing.
Yeah. So the definition of delusion is a false belief or judgment about external reality held despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary. And it's so awesome, like in the drag community, that the word delusion is absolutely equated with confidence, because it's about telling yourself and reassuring yourself that we are exceptional, that we are capable, that we are brilliant. And it's sort of sad that we live in a world where we have to tell that our exceptionalism, because we are all exceptional, is delusion. But if that's what it takes, then hell yeah, call me delusional.
Especially, like, I know in Australia, this is a thing, we call it tall poppy syndrome, is that we don't allow people to explain the metaphor, poppies, flowers in a field, and if a poppy grows too tall, you cut it down so that it, like, the field looks better, kind of thing.
Yeah, everything's equal.
Yeah, you don't let anyone shine. And so we have tall poppy syndrome here in Australia, of like, we are very quick to bring down others, and evidently ourselves, for doing well and for accomplishing and stepping out and taking risks. It is tough to practice grace, especially towards yourself. But a good way to practice it is to give it to others, and then it becomes something natural to say in your mouth and in your mind, that you might accidentally give yourself some grace.
So follow on from, I think a good segue on from that to one of my points is about trusting the process in whatever you're doing in life, and practicing patience as well. Patience is a huge part of grace. But like, the way that I practice giving myself grace is to trust the process, because so often things will feel out of your control and feel like things aren't going the way that they should be going, or you're not doing as well at something that you were aiming for. And so in those moments, that's when you have to give yourself grace. You have to go, like, you're doing fine. Like, just keep on trucking. Yeah. And for me, trusting the process is having an understanding that whatever I'm doing, other people have done the same thing. Other people are smarter than me, for sure. Other people are more experienced than me, and they've gone through it and they've learned. And if I can learn from them and apply those learnings to myself, then that actually gives you, like, if you do question your own abilities and skills, throw that responsibility on the universe. Throw that responsibility on everything else but yourself. Throw that responsibility onto the process. You sort of go like, okay, I am doing X, Y, and Z. I'm not sure if it's going the way it should be, but I know that the process says you do X, Y, and Z. Just let it happen and let it all come out in the wash.
You said something about, like, there are people smarter than me and people probably further along than me.
Yeah.
The opposite is true as well. And this is a surprisingly comforting thing. There are people who aren't smarter than you, or may not have the same resources as you, or might be having a harder time than you, that still figure it out. And so it's like, okay, like, you might use that as a way to be critical of yourself, but it can give you hope. Like, I, throughout COVID, worked at Centrelink and worked with disadvantaged communities and people needing help and support. And I would see like young mothers, maybe 19, 20 years old, they got 3 or 4 kids. They have almost no money. the Australian government does not provide a sufficient amount of money to get out of these kind of crisis situations. And those kids are happy. Those kids are healthy. Those kids are thriving. That mum is obviously exhausted, but she is giving it her best shot, and she is killing it. And I am at times very critical of myself as a parent and want to be doing more. And I just think it's like, oh, that person who is facing so many challenges is absolutely smashing it and turning up. And obviously everyone fails at times, but like that person is an inspiration for me. It's like, oh, they can do it. I can do it. Like, we've got this. Like, we are all trying our hardest, and little blips, like, again, trust the process, aren't the final result. It's this idea of progress isn't linear. Like, again, to use a fitness metaphor or whatever, I'm currently losing weight, and I've got a bit of weight to lose. And so I am also a bit of a data nerd. So I am tracking my weight daily, right? And so I keep a log of my weight and all that kind of stuff. And the trend line is down, right? Like, you put it into a graph.
Oh, the trend. I love the trend line.
The trend line is
in
down.
Anything.
Yeah, but the day-to-day numbers are all over the fucking place. Like, I could weigh something today and then work out and eat right and all that kind of stuff, and then weigh more tomorrow. It's like, wait, what? And like, if you got caught up in that little mistake or whatever, then it's like you'll throw it all in the bin. and if you just trust it, like, oh, I just need to turn up every day. And I guess, Steve, I'm not sure if you had more to talk about this, but this ties really nicely into a point that I have about an identity shift of like...
Can I make one point?
Yeah, please.
So, like, I love the concept of the trend line because it applies across everything. What I love to tell myself is ignore the instance, ignore the individual data points, ignore whatever's happened on that day or that hour or that week or even that quarter, and look at the big picture as well. Because if we get upset by the ebbs, the small ebbs and flows, it can distract you from the fact that, wow, you're actually probably doing way better than you think. Absolutely. And it's that's what I remind myself in the advocacy I do in the bi space is like, there'll be little setbacks, but then if I look back and say, well, compare this to 2 years ago, none of what we have even existed. So, okay, sure, like, there's this disappointing thing came out, or like this disappointing thing happened, but my God, we are 10 steps ahead.
Exactly.
So what's one step back?
Progress is slow.
Nothing.
It's not linear. Like, and so this shift into don't be results focused necessarily. Like, don't aim for, I want to lose 30 kilos or I want to write a book, or what to say, cool, I'm going to be the person who takes care of my health. I am a person who sits down and writes. I am a person who engages politically, whatever that might be. And then because that you've shifted into an identity and a way of being, the results almost happen just as a consequence. And if you can shift the way of being to be values focused, like, so for me, it's like I might be critical on, I got frustrated with Dallas today, my child. It's like, oh, but like I am a good father. And because of X, Y, and Z, I value empathy. I value quality time, all these things. Then it comes out in the wash that like, oh, I do those things well with my child or with my partner or whatever it might be. And that's I don't know why I didn't learn this earlier in life. I was just told, go to the gym, lose weight, or why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Instead of like, who are you, and who are you becoming, and what does that look like for you? That was such a shift for me, and it becomes a feedback loop. Like, your habits inform your identity informs your habits, and then back and forth. To then you go from wanting to kind of be a certain person to being a certain person.
I find this when people ask me for fitness tips, because I've been on this journey for a few years now, and it is really difficult to give people those tips because it is such a holistic thing. It's an identity shift, and how do you possibly explain? How do you guide someone through an identity shift? I can give you little tips like, wake up early, go for walks, all these sorts of things. But those are really difficult if you don't become the person, if you don't, like I did just like after like 3 months of doing morning walks, be like, oh, I'm a walker?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Since when did I become
Since
a
when?
walker?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, I'm a walker.
Yeah. Yeah. How interesting.
And then it just becomes second nature.
Just the thing you do. Yeah.
It just becomes that thing that I do.
Yeah, and I came across this principle years ago called self-similarity, and it's kind of the things at a small degree are the way they are at a big degree. And so if you look at like a leaf, right? You look, a leaf has, or a tree is a good example. Look at a tree, it's a big stick with arms coming out of it. And then cool, you look at that little arm, that limb, you go, oh, the limb is kind of the same. It's a big stick with arms coming out of it. They're branches. You look at the branches. Oh, okay, there's a pattern here. Like the thing at a small
Even
thing.
the leaves.
Exactly. And so you look at certain mountains. That mountain looks jagged and rough because all the rocks on that mountain are jagged and rough all the way up to the top. And the opposite is true. But you can do this in your own life as well. Like if you don't feel like the identity shift is kind of coming naturally to you, you could start with today. What does today look like for somebody who is in that identity? Like, what does it look like for someone who does look after their health? What does it look like for someone who is politically engaged? What would they do today? Oh, they'd email a minister, or they would they would contact this person or organize this kind of meeting or a panel. That's what that politically engaged person would do. Oh, I can afford to do that today. I've got time. And you do that tomorrow and the next day. And then the identity shift can come again. It's kind of like that. It informs itself.
It goes with what I was saying before about realizing your strengths and your weaknesses and giving yourself grace. If it's not working, if you want to be that jagged mountain and it's not working, and you've given it a hot go, and you can actually just be at peace with not being that jagged mountain, like at not being that person. I find being able to find that peace really, really important, and being able to give yourself that patience and that grace. I know we're using those words so much, but they're really important words that we need to repeat to ourselves and be like, well then who do I want to become? What do I want to do? What am I good at? What can I learn? Because it's just because you can't be this thing doesn't mean you can't be something else absolutely extraordinary.
I think it also comes down to like, who are you doing it for, right? Are you like for me, I've previously tried to get fit because I was doing it for other people. My brother, I love him, but he's very fit, and I have felt guilt around not being fit or whatever, and that kind of pressure. Or am I doing it for when I was in the band? Like, oh, guys, we need to look hot on our posters so that we sell tickets. Like, everyone needs to like look a certain way. It's like, oh, that's not true to me. And I guess this goes into you've got here is that self-esteem and not giving a fuck about other people's expectations for you, but your own expectations for you.
Look, that's a great segue. I know where you're going with this. Stop giving a fuck, and others' opinions of me are none of my bloody business. What other people have to say or think or tell or say, the shoulds, you should, what about, why aren't you? Nah. In one ear, out the other. It is water off a duck's back. You do exactly what you want to do, what you need to do, what you want to do. There's so much in life out there for the taking. There's that 2 a.m. moment in the morning where you're like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to email that minister. I'm going to see what happens because the world is your opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's there to be taken, and other people will notice. Other people will notice, and it might take time. I know that, like with my bisexuality, one of the things that really limited me in the beginning was like, people don't see me as a bisexual man. People, there's so much erasure. There's just so many mean comments, and I just had to tell myself, what other people doesn't matter. It's what I'm doing. It's the relationships I'm having. It's how I feel about myself that matters most. I do not give two buggers about what other people have to say about my sexuality. And that was, I think we've talked about it on the pod before, and that was such a freeing moment because it literally doesn't matter what other people think. What matters, the opinions of people that matter that do matter to me are, the people that I'm sleeping with, the people that want to form relationships with,
Yeah.
and also the closest people. And then it's so funny, like, about 3 years after I came out, like some of my closest mates who did question my sexuality because I hid it so well for so long. There was a lot of trauma involved in it that, I did so much, we've all heard my story. But, when I actually had like a close friend of mine be like, you really are bisexual. And I was just sort of like, yeah. If he said that to me 3 years earlier, I would have done it like had this big reaction and just be like, yes, thank you. And I'm just like, yeah.
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 It kind of reminds me, there's this great book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it's by Bronnie Ware. And she is an Australian who has worked in caregiving in like palliative care, right? And so she would talk to people who are dying and learn about their regrets. Like, what do they wish they did? And the number one regret well, the number one thing they say is, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. It's like we all get to the end one day, and you like, how cool would it be to have a different regret? Like, to have a regret that wasn't about a misalignment of who you are.
Mm-hmm. Can I tell you something, Chad? Like, I look back on so many mistakes that I've made in my own life, and like, there were a good 5 years of my 20s which were just a black hole and so damaging and so awful and so horrible. And I do look back and I wonder, like, there's a question that you'll hear on like daytime television or whatever, like, do you regret anything? And I don't know. I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, I actually don't regret a thing, because for some, do I feel lucky that I have self-esteem and confidence? Do I have a lot of low self-esteem? Yes. Do I have a lot of low confidence? Yes. But also at a point where I go like, no, like everything that I have experienced in my life, the good and the bad, have made me who I am. And when I look in the mirror, the good and the bad, am I happy? And it's just like, yeah, you know what? Like, I am. It's such a nice place to be in. There are so many things that objectively should have changed, that objectively, you do regret. But if you can sort of go on the trend line, like, you know what? It's good.
Maybe this is like a kitsch way to kind of sum it up, but it's like any story that you read, watch, anything like that, the hero or whoever gets to the end is like, cool, I got here. But like, the getting here is through all the shit. They had to face those challenges. They had to question themselves and doubt themselves. And then they had to have the dark night of the soul. If anyone is a writer, you would have read Blake Snyder's Save the Cat book. The dark night of the soul is where they kind of throw in the towel and they're done for it. And then, oh no, then they kind of convince themselves it's worth it. And I'm going to go on the ascent back to my original goal. And the story is interesting because of all those things. Like, you have to have moments of challenge and change and difficulty to have an interesting, fulfilled life. And yes, our lives aren't storybooks, but it is a truism, I think, of our experience that we will be challenged, and the best things that happen to us are usually the challenges, but you don't know until after you've gone through it. You always feel like, what did I do to deserve this? And then you go through it and you go, wow, I did that thing, and look where I am. Yeah. So we touched on in the intro about the current shift of political winds, and it's kind of the nicest way to say that. And we are seeing, obviously, a lot of people online talking about just the kind of the lack of hope and feeling hopeless and not knowing where to turn and how to turn up in the world at the moment, because there are powers that are actively taking away rights and targeting groups in our community. And that's really fucking hard. And I wanted to add a bit of a part at the end of this episode in line with what we're talking about the power that you have and stepping into your power, to remind you that if you are feeling hopeless, remember that we build hope by fighting for hope. These next 4 years might feel daunting, but disengaging and switching off is not the answer. That's actually what they want you to do. By throwing in the towel, you pre-agree with things that are going to happen, or you kind of give them the permission to take. Social media is wonderful in certain ways, and we can connect and find community on social media. And marching down the street for a cause is also super powerful. We love those things. We do those things. We'll be standing next to you doing those things. They're great for awareness and connection. But as we've seen and discussed on this episode, change can happen in other areas and happens through sustained strategic action. So I wanted to kind of talk about some accessible and practical ways to reclaim power. And there's a lot of them. We won't talk through all of them, but we will post them on social media for you to have a look at and share all that kind of stuff. And before we kind of dig into, I really wanted to kind of speak about why local action matters. We look at these big national elections and you go, I don't have any influence. I have no say. I am just a single person. How can I make a difference? And progressives have faced a decline over the last 4 decades because of a shift away from deep organizing, like the really kind of coming together and moving institutions, into shallow mobilizing. That's like the social media campaigns you'd see. It's good for connecting, but it's not making shifts. Folks on the right, if they do have one thing they do really, really well, they have mastered this strategy, is they understand that real change happens in places like school boards, city councils, committee rooms. They dissect power structures, map networks, and act decisively and input themselves into those rooms where decisions are being made, which should give you a little bit of hope because change isn't out of reach. Many of these actions are more accessible than they seem. Signing up for a committee, writing an email, running for a local board might feel intimidating, but it's just a matter of showing up.
And I might add there, Chad, as well. There might be people on those committees, in those groups that you disagree with, but it's important that we put ourselves in those spaces.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of a trend of disengaging with people who disagree with you. And I get that for protecting your mental health or your sanity or your capacity. That I get that. However, again, we talk often about trying to be pragmatic and making change. And sometimes it's about being in the same room as those people and changing hearts and minds and being really thoughtful and empathetic. We are not born with hate in our hearts. Hate is learned. And sometimes people don't recognize that those things could be seen as hate. Everyone is the hero of their own story. And so how can we engage with those people and collaborate with those people who have power or step in the room with power? So here's a few ways to take local political action after you've gone through all this confidence building, all this manifesting, all the stepping out into your confidence. So number one is get involved in boards, committees, and positions of power. Don't assume that the people speaking on your behalf represent you. For example, we know many local LGBT plus organizations that might overlook the rights and needs of the bi community or of trans issues, right? Just because they're LGBT doesn't mean they are representative of our communities. So you can join school boards, council committees, planning groups, and other decision-making bodies to ensure that your voice is a part of the conversation. Super, super powerful. And it's bizarrely simple. Like your local council will post on their website about when they're hiring, when they're doing that kind of stuff, when they're going out for new members. You just put your hand up. It's as simple as that. Number two, I would say commit to talking about social and political topics. It is not taboo to talk about these things. Use your circle of influence to discuss important issues. Politics is the path to freedom. It's not taboo, right? Change starts with conversations with friends, family, etc.
Another really powerful thing and something we talk about, and we talk about it here because it's in our skill set, and that's participating in public hearings and policy discussions. And, if we just see how powerful it is to have a seat at the policy table, have our voices heard in policy discussions, and ensuring, because we live in bureaucracies, we live in places that it might make it really difficult when there are strategic plans, when there are policies that have already been released and we're not included. But find out when those next discussions are happening, find out when the next plan is being discussed, and get yourself in the room. And it's as easy as making connections and communications to the people involved and making sure that you're in there, and just get your big buy button in there.
Absolutely. And a way to know when they're taking part is like politicians and different offices will have email lists that you can subscribe to. Subscribe to them and just like look through what's happening in my area. Again, even the people who aren't on your side of the fence, but they might be on your local council or local area. Go to those events and raise your hand at question time. Those types of things matter. That happened to me recently. Steve invited me to go along to one. It was a politics at the pub event, and they're discussing a big policy change here in New South Wales. And I asked about the needs of bi people who were left out of that. And they said, thank you for asking that. I'm going to get back to you with an answer. I need to go push some buttons and ask some people. So that conversation is heard. Another one is to join or start local advocacy groups. This is how Steve and I met. We both met through the Sydney Bi Plus network and have served on leadership team there previously, and I am this year. Collaborate with others who share your values. Or if maybe you don't feel that connected to the values of your community, this is a great way to figure that out. Local groups are powerful hubs for organizing campaigns and amplifying voices.
And then the final one here is to empower others to recognize their power, something we talk about a lot here and something we encourage you all to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. We kind of said before about the people are engaged to the degree that they're educated, and they're educated to the degree that they engage. And people are so powerful. Their networks are powerful. Their opinions and values are powerful. Diverse networks, diverse groups and people help strengthen our community. And you might feel like one person, but one person has a vote and one person can be tremendously powerful. But then you are one person in a community of one persons, and together we can really shift the needle. And it behooves us. There we go. Classic word. It behooves us over the next 4 years and into the future and forever is to really engage. And because shutting off robs us of our own opportunity to step into our power. Ordinary people can transition from just observers and passive constituents, I guess, into active change makers when they understand the value of their unique networks, their knowledge, and their abilities. So you listening have power. You have tremendous influence. If you choose to step into it or not is up to you.
Absolutely. And the personal is political. You are so powerful. You are so clever. You are so capable. And I hope that what we've discussed on today's podcast around confidence, around self-esteem, I hope that you can all take away some of these helpful tips to actually look at that mirror and say, you know what? I can bloody well do this. I can bloody well do this, and I can support those around me and help them recognize their power just like we've done.
Yeah, absolutely. That was maybe a bit of a heavy end of it, but I feel like I'm seeing a shift in community. I feel like there's this kind of shared knowledge, this shared kind of wanting to step into power. And so it felt appropriate at this time to really kind of spark a bit of a flame.
No, it's important because, I mean, we started off the discussion by talking about, how many bicep curls we can do. Let's motivate people this year. No, but it is so much more than that. The bicep curl is important, but building up yourself through confidence and self-esteem can create political change. And that's so important this time. So you know what? Let's go kick some us.
Yeah,
Let's go
absolutely.
create some change.
And speaking of community, again, we have the Facebook group. If you go to the show notes, there's a link to that. Come and join us. We have great conversations about all these things. Would love to see you there. Sign up to our mailing list so you know what we are doing or where we're engaging with the community. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Give It To Me By, everyone. Love you all.
Love you.